Hey guys, Eric here. I'm joined by Tal and Roth to talk Game of Thrones. Full spoilers for the 4 seasons that have aired are about to follow. But Matt Fowler just did his ranking the Game of Thrones seasons feature.
An impossible task.
As he said it at the front, that's difficult, right?
It's certainly one that's going to inspire a lot of emotion.
A lot of emotion. Sure. Matt mentioned though, it's basically just ranking which is more awesome than the others, because none of this. It's not like we're saying the one that's at the bottom is bad. They're just all great. It's just what's the best. What's the best of the great? We have our opinions, but let's quickly go through what Matt wrote.
And then we can malign him.
Then we can malign because he's in Texas doing Texas things right now. So we'll just say you're wrong, Matt.
Don't mess with Texas.
No, that's true. That's true. Or Westeros. So he did from the bottom, but they're all great. At number 4, he put season 1, followed in third place by season 3. That was the controversial one. He knows. In second place, season 4, and then his number 1 pick. His favorite season of Game of Thrones, the one he thinks is the best, is season 2.
But
he
makes a very compelling argument for that. Because I think initially you're like, are you mad, man?
Right.
You know? Right. But he really does make a good argument about this having some terrific character arcs for both Tyrion and Arya.
Yeah.
Which, if those are 2 of your favorite characters, which they are, that's great.
Yeah,
sure, but I think season 4 had some of the best character arcs for both Tyrion and Arya, as well as a lot of other characters in it. For me personally, I really like season 4 the best, and I'm not sure if that's just because it's more fresh in my memory than the other ones, but I just think all the things that they went into and being book readers, right? Mm-hmm. Seeing Tywin's death, seeing Joffrey's death, who I think we were all waiting for him to die. The Oberyn and the Mountain battle was just amazing, and then the last 2 episodes, the battle at the Wall, I just thought was just an amazing piece of cinematography too. Not only like a great story to see there, but just really shot well, really beautiful. And then of course the season finale as well. And some of the things that we're catching up. We're actually caught up to the books now.
Right.
At this point, and even surpassed the books in some things.
Yeah, there was some interesting little hints of things that we think might be in a future book.
Yeah, which we assume will be in a future book since they know where it's all heading.
Ending
up in D.B. Weiss.
Because I don't have the same pick as Matt for number 1, but before we move on with Matt's thoughts, but I will say, the other arguments he made that I liked a lot were the fact that season 2 is probably, if you're about the Game of Thrones and the war, season 2 is the big season, right? Because just naming off all the characters that are dead, but it's like Renly was involved and Robb was involved and Joffrey, and it was all these forces all leading to Blackwater, which was a pretty amazing, accomplishment itself there.
It's truly the beginning of the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, this is like where you're really playing it, and you have, well, I'll save this for later. But this is, the idea of the Game of Thrones is really played out in season 2. So it's another reason that it is a strong season. It is not my favorite. It's not my number 1. But I do think that he makes a very compelling argument for it being a great season of television, though it doesn't have that big meme-making moment.
It doesn't have a big death, actually. Season 2, I think the reason we don't jump to it is because it doesn't have a shocking death.
Well, it doesn't have a shocking death. It doesn't have the birth of dragons. It doesn't have a lot of the big events that we've come to associate with Game of Thrones. But the reason that the show is great, the reason that the stories are great, is because I say, even if you know about it, it's still great storytelling. This is still great character arcs. And if it relied on those moments, which it doesn't, I think it would be a lesser show.
Yeah, and season 2 is where they're setting everything up.
Yeah.
You really get the backstory in season 2.
And I feel like it's also the season where they started to introduce new elements in a bigger way that were really awesome elements, like the Arya-Tywin relationship, which was just a great, interesting, 2 really strong characters playing off each other in a really intriguing way, and how much does he know, how much does he not? He does seem to be fond of her. That was all really fascinating stuff.
One of the strongest in a whole series of amazing pairings that we've seen on the show, whether it's Jaime and Brienne or Arya and the Hound. Arya and Tywin was great.
Yeah.
They were very fascinating.
But you get something that didn't happen in the books. It was something that was new and interesting, right?
Yeah.
People who had, people who had read the books were like, oh, this is kind of an interesting new dynamic. So, I found it the exact same way. I was like, I'm very intrigued by it.
And it revealed things about each of them, I thought, in a way that was you could tell what's so great about David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, and then we'll actually say what our favorites are, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that because they are such big fans that they can imagine new conversations for these characters because they know the material so well and they know the characters so well and they love them so much that they can go, but what if these two people got together and you buy it, you know?
Well, that is the interesting thing, right? In the books, you have different people meeting at different times.
Yeah.
Why not some side stories that, that weren't necessarily spelled out in the books, but those what ifs, right? There was kind of a really interesting twists.
Now, you mentioned it in passing, Tal, but yeah, let's go through our picks for the best.
I jumped the gun a little bit.
It's okay, yeah. It's a preview. It's a teaser. Let's go over our picks for the best season of Game of Thrones for each of us. And so you mentioned in passing, but go a little more in depth on why season 4 jumps out at you.
So season 4 for me, again, being a book reader, it's actually showing me some things that I haven't seen in the book. So it's new story, right? Even though they do introduce new story throughout all the seasons, just the story between, or the meeting of the Hound and Brienne, I really liked that interaction. I thought that was super interesting. I thought the Hound and Arya, even though a lot of that happened in the book, they added a lot of new things too, and it really showed a lot of dynamics with those characters. Arya, of course, leaving at the end, going off to Braavos. Definitely am interested to see how they handle that, because in my opinion, in the book, that was actually a little slow. So I'm curious to see what they're going to do next season. I think they have to keep it very interesting and intense for the readers to really latch on to it, or for the watchers to really latch on to it.
Right.
And then just all the stuff that happened at the Wall in season 4.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really when the ish is hitting the fan. Like things are really coming down hard. And then finally Stannis comes in. We were expecting to see that. The book readers were, and that was just just great to see. I love the fight between Oberyn and the Mountain, and then of course you see Qyburn bringing the Mountain back at the end. So all these little interesting twists that again are right at either at the end of the books that they're at now, are a little bit beyond, like the Night's King that we saw with the baby, and all the White Walkers there. Just interesting stuff. I want to see where that goes. Magic's starting to come back to the land. It's really getting a lot more fantasy steeped.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just I think to me that's the turning point of what's going on in the Game of Thrones. Right now you have this whole new faction that's involved, and these new powers that are coming up. So again, really high fantasy coming into it.
So Roth, what about you? What's your favorite season?
I'm totally going to cheat a little bit, because I think that for all of the reasons that you just mentioned, that season 4 is the most full season, right? And I'm a huge fantasy fan, so the more magic, the better for me, And I think they've done a great job of slowly building to that. And I think it has a big battle. It has some great character arcs in terms of what happens with Tyrion and Arya again. It has huge consequences. I know that Daenerys is a controversial character, but one of the more interesting things about the season, I think for her, she probably had the best arc in season 1, but that you start to see, even when you win, you lose. You know what I mean? Even though, theoretically speaking, she's into her happy ending right now, but it's more complicated than that. She's freed the slaves. That doesn't mean everything's going to work out, and I think
she has the dragons. They're powerful, and yet now there's
she can't control them.
She can't control them.
Yeah.
There's evil beset on the land, and so she's got to weigh these judgments. Right?
Yeah, and it's way more complicated than you would initially think, where it's just this bad but chick with dragons. It's not that easy, and I think that that's some of the nuance that happens with these characters in the show, and it's really full in this season and coming to fruition. So this is, I think, the biggest season in that way. But we couldn't get here without the rest of the season, so I do think that the most succinct storytelling, oddly enough, happened in season 1, and that was the moment where the big Ned's death, I think, had the biggest impact.
The first big shock.
It was the first big shock. It was the first time that people were really like, this is not what you think it's going to be.
It's not going to tell a traditional
This is not going to tell a traditional story.
Yeah.
Things are going to happen in a way that you don't like, but also make perfect sense when you think about who these people are, who Joffrey is, that he would make that decision. So oddly enough, I think that was the clearest, most succinct, unto itself season. But my favorite season, and it's been earned, is this one, season 4. Cheated.
Cheated, tie,
Well, that's the thing, too, like Matt said, right? There hasn't been a bad season.
There hasn't been a bad season.
It's not like it's a worst to best list. It's a really good to best list.
Right, because all you start to do is you do start to look at, well, I guess this season had this aspect I wasn't as in love with. Like season 3, I could be like, yeah, the Theon stuff was a little much, but it's still such great stuff going on around it. I do think I'd also pick season 4. It's a little difficult, like you said, to be sure because it's so fresh in your mind, but when I think about it, it was a really, first of all, and this is because of the book, but it was a really full season. Like Joffrey's death happened in the second episode? So it was like things were they weren't just aiming towards the end. It was like, wow, things are just happening all through, which is a testament to the third book and how crazy that book is.
You just have to think about, laying it out. What would be the death count for that entire, especially the last 2 episodes in this season, just at the Wall alone, the number of death count. But major characters, so many major characters that were, essential to the story, totally killed off. Lyssa, Tywin, Oberyn, who I loved and wish that he was still around and could see more of him, but oh well.
Right.
But as a surprise too, like I was really expecting the season to end with Lady Stoneheart.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen.
Yeah. And
yeah, I was watching it with some friends, and they're like, "I think it's over," and I go, "No, it's not. No, it's just got to have like 5 more minutes left." And then the credits rolled, and I was like, "What's going on?"
Yeah, I could just see at the end though. Just they could have done an allusion to it. I was waiting for the very end to be like a
Yeah,
like at the very end, right? Just a quick clip. Yeah.
But I love that it was a very sort of even season as far as covering a lot of characters and people that had kind of been floating in the background rose back up. I'm a huge Littlefinger fan, and to really get the full info on what he's been up to was great. And I love Sansa kind of coming into her own.
Dark Sansa.
Dark Sansa. I'm very excited about Dark Sansa. So yeah, I really felt like, they really did right by almost every character this season in a lot of ways. And there were some missteps here and there, like every TV show has. But when I looked at the entire season, I was like, wow, they accomplished so much. And it's so difficult when you think about how many characters there are to do them all right and to give them all a proper story, and yet I think they accomplish it.
Absolutely,
they did. Yeah, and they also leave you leading into what's to come in a great way, which in a series like this you need to do.
Well, it was a super disruptive season in season 4 because we're used to major characters dying each season, but like you're saying, in episode 2 we already had Joffrey dead, right? And we're used to the penultimate episode being like the one where you're like, oh, the big death
this is gonna happen.
But and we had that, but then in the last episode, the last like 3 or 4 episodes, so were all big major changes and character points, and I really enjoyed too as a book reader the Wall episode that they really only focused on the Wall, because to me it felt like reading one of the chapters in the book that was focused only on Jon. Even though obviously you're seeing it from different perspectives there, I thought that was a great allusion to the books as well.
Well, guys, obviously we all love Game of Thrones here. We know you do too. Matt's pick for the best season was season number 2. Tal and I went with 4. Roth, she split the difference with 1 and 4. But let us know what you thought in the comments. It's pretty much all just, rating which was the most awesome of them all. And we'll have plenty more on Game of Thrones in the months to come before season 5.
Hodor.